Storms. I would have gone back to Morichapi the very next week, but was prevented by all the usual procedures and ceremonies that accompany a schoolmaster's retirement. At the end, however, it was all over, and I was officially reckoned a man who had reached the completion of his working life. A few days later, Horan knocked on my study door. Sir, I have just come from the market at Kumirmari, he said. I met Kusum there, and she insisted I bring her here. Here, I said with a start. To Lucy Barry? But why? To meet with Mashima. The Morichapi people want to ask Mashima for help. I understood at once this too was part of the settlers' efforts to enlist support, yet I could have told him that in this instance it was unlikely to bear fruit. Horin, you should have stopped Kuzum from coming, I said. It'll serve no purpose for her to meet with Nilima. I did tell her, sir, but she insisted. So where is she now? She's downstairs, sir, waiting to see Mashima. But look who I've brought upstairs. He stepped aside, and I saw now that Fakir had been lurking behind him all this while. I've got to go to the market, sir, so I'll just leave him here with you. With that, he went bounding down the stairs, leaving me alone with the 5-year-old. As a school teacher, I was accustomed to dealing with children in the plural. Never having had a child of my own, I was unused to coping with them in the singular. Now subjected to the scrutiny of a lone pair of wide-open 5-year-old eyes, I forgot everything I had planned to say. In a near panic, I led the boy across the roof and pointed to the Raimangal's Mahona. Look, comrade, I said. Look! Follow your eyes and tell me, what do you see? I suppose he was asking himself what I wanted. After looking this way and that, he said at last, I see the bad, sir. The bad? Yes, of course, the bad. This was not the answer I had expected, but I fell upon it with inexpressible relief, for the bad is not just the guarantor of human life on our island. It is also our abacus and archive, our library of stories. So long as I had the bad in sight, I knew I would not lack for something to say. Go on, comrade. Look again. Look carefully. Let's see if you can pick out all the spots where the embankment had been repaired. For each such repair, I'll give you a story. Fokir lifted a hand to point. What happened there, sir? Ah, there. That breach happened 20 years ago, and it was neither storm nor flood that caused it. It was made by a man who wanted to settle a score with the family who lived next door to his. In the depths of the night, he made a hole in the dike, thinking to drown his neighbor's fields. It never entered his mind to think that he was doing just as much harm to himself as to his enemy. That's why neither families live here anymore. For 10 years afterwards, nothing grew in their fields. And there, sir, what happened there? That one began simply enough, with an exceptionally high tide, a kotal gone that came spilling over the top. The contract for the repairs was given to a man who was the brother-in-law of the head of the Panchayat. He swore he would fix it so that never again would a drop of water leak through. But they found later that the contract had put it only half the materials he had been paid for. The profits had been shared by many different brothers-in-law. And over there, sir? Even storytellers know that discretion is sometimes a wiser course than valor. As for that one, comrade, I had better not tell you too much. Do you see the people who live there in those dwellings that run beside the embankment? It happened once that the people of the Para had voted for the wrong party, so when the other party came to power, they decided to settle scores. Their way of doing it was to make a hole in the bot of such things, my friend, our politicians made. But let's not dwell on this too much. It may not be good for our health. Look there instead. Follow my finger. I pointed him in a direction where a kilometer length of the embankment had been beaten down in the 1930s by a storm. Imagine, Fokir, I said. Imagine the lives of your ancestors. They were new to this island, freshly arrived in the tide country. After years of struggle, they had managed to create the foundations of the Bad. They have had even managed to grow a few handfuls of rice and vegetables. After years of living on the stilt-raised platforms, they had finally been able to descend to earth and make few shacks and shanties on the level ground. All this by virtue of the Bad. And imagine that fateful night when the storm struck at exactly the time that Akotal Gon was setting in. Imagine how they cowered in their roofless huts and watched the waters rising, gnawing at the mud and the sand they had laid down to hold the river off. Imagine what went through their heads as they watched this devouring tide eating its way through the earthworks, stalking them wherever they were. There was not one among them, I will guarantee you, my young friend, who would not rather have stood before a tiger than have looked into the maws of that tide. Were there other storms, sir? Yes, many. Look there. I pointed to an indentation in the island's shore, a place that looked as if some giant had bitten off a part of the Lucibari's coast. Look! That was done by the storm of 1970. It was a bangon, a breaking. The river tore off a 4-acre piece of land and carried it away. In an instant it was gone, its huts, fields, trees, all devoured. Was that the worst storm of all, sir? No, comrade, no. The worst storm of all, they say, was long before my time. Long before the settlers first came to this island. When, sir? It was in 1737. The emperor Aurangzeb had died some 30 years before, and the country was in turmoil. Calcutta was a new place then. The English had seized their opportunity and made it the main port of the East. Go on, sir. It happened in October. That's always when the worst of them strike. October and November. Before the storm had even made landfall, the tide country was hit by a huge wave, a wall of water 12 meters in height. Can you imagine how high that is, my friend? It would have drowned everything on your island in an hour's too. Even we on this roof would have been underwater. No. Yes, comrade, yes. There were people in Calcutta, Englishmen, who took measurements and recorded all the details. The waters rose so high that they killed thousands of animals and carried them upriver and inland. The corpses of tigers and rhinoceros were found kilometers from the river, in rice fields and in village ponds. There were fields covered with the feathers of dead birds. And as this monstrous wave was traveling through the tide country, racing towards Calcutta, something else happened. Something unimaginable. What, sir? What? The city was hit by an earthquake. No. Yes, my friend, yes. That's one of the reasons why this storm became so famous. There were people, scientists who believe there is a mysterious connection between earthquakes and storms. But this was the first known instance of these two catastrophes happening together. So what happened, sir? In Kolkata, tens of thousands of dwellings fell instantly to the ground. The Englishmen's palaces as well as houses and huts. The steeple of the English church toppled over and came crashing down. They say there was not a building in the city left with four walls intact. Bridges were blown away, wharves were carried off by the surging waters, Godowns were emptied of their rice, and gunpowder and the armories were scattered by the wind. On the river were many ships at anchor, large and small, from many nations. Among them there were 2 English ships of 500 tons each. The wind picked them up and carried them over the tops of trees and houses. It threw them down 1/2 kilometer from the river. People saw huge barges fluttering in the air like paper kites. They say that over 20,000 vessels were lost that day, including boats, barges, dinghies, and the like. And even among those that remained, many strange things happened. What, Tsar? What? A French ship was driven on shore with some of its cargo intact. The day after the storm, the remaining members of the crew went out into the fields to try to salvage what they could from the wreckage. A crewman was sent down into one of the holds to see what had been spared. After he had been gone a while, his mates shouted to ask him what was taking him so long. There was no answer, so they sent another man. He too fell quickly silent, as did the man who followed him. Now a panic set in, and no one else would agree to go in until after a fire had been lit so as to see what was going on. When the flame was kindled, they saw that the hold was filled with water, and swimming in this tank was an enormous crocodile. It had killed those 3 men. And this, my friend and comrade, is a true story recorded in documents stored in the British Museum, the very place where Marx wrote Das Kapital. But Tsar, it couldn't happen again, Tsar, could it? I could see Fokir was trying to gauge the appetite of our rivers, and I would have liked to put his young mind at rest, but I knew also that it would have been wrong to deceive him. My friend, not only could it happen again, it will happen again. A storm will come, the waters will rise, and the Bad will succumb. In part or in whole, it is only a matter of time. How do you know, Sir? He said quietly. Look at it, my friend. Look at the Bad. See how frail it is, how fragile. Look at the waters that flow past it and how limitless they are, how patient, how quietly they bide their time. Just to look at it is to know why the waters must prevail, later if not sooner. But if you're not convinced by the evidence of your eyes, then perhaps you will have to use your ears. My ears? Yes, come with me. I led him down the stairs across the fields. People must have stared to see us, me in my flapping white dhoti with my umbrella unfurled against the sun, and Fokir in his ragged shorts racing along at my heels. I went right up to the embankment and put my left ear against the clay. Now put your head on the Bad and listen carefully. Tell me what you hear and let's see if you can guess what it is. I hear a scratching sound, Sir, he said in a while. It's very soft. But what is making this sound? He listened a while longer and then his face lit up with a smile. Are they crabs, Sir? Yes, Fokir. Not everyone can hear them, but you did. Even as we stand here, untold multitudes of crabs are burrowing into our Bad. Now ask yourself, how long can this frail fence last against these monstrous appetites, the crabs and the tides, the winds and the storms? And if it falls, who shall we turn to then, comrade? Who, Sir? Who indeed, Fokir? Neither angels nor men will hear us. And as for the animals, they won't hear us either. Why not, Sir? Because of what the poet says, Fokir. Because the animals already know by instinct we're not comfortably at home in our translated world.